I'm checking
Okay.
YouTube.
It says live. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna open it on my phone. All right. I know it says live in the corner. We're just gonna kind of CPT it for a second right here, just to make sure everybody can get on and it can be seen. Okay, cool. Yep. And we are live. All righty. Do you see the viewer count on there as well?
On the YouTube?
Yeah.
Jen just checked. I didn't go on YouTube, but I'll do it.
Okay. For those watching, we're just kind of giving some space and time and opportunity for folks to log in. To my panelists, if you have social media and you want to just like quickly holler out like, hey, we're live right now, feel free to do that. We're just kind of hanging out. I'm going to jump real quick here on Facebook and shout out that we are live. So just real quickly, I plan on doing introductions, and then I'll do my little spiel, and then I'll throw out the first question, and we can just rock from there. All right, live now. Okay, I see 18 watching on my. Yeah. All right, I'm pretty sure that will go up shortly. Let's put this last link. We are this piece. All righty. So let's go ahead and get started. Peace and love to everyone. My name is Dr. Nate Williams. I'm associate professor at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. My pronouns are he, him, his, brother. I like long walks in the hood. My favorite color is orange. I want to just first start off by thanking everyone for joining us today. And we're going to start off by doing a quick, brief introduction of who we are, how we identify, and then we're going to get started with this bad boy. So, whomever wants to go first. See, I can't do my teacher stare at the screen. I'm looking at all of y'all at once.
I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Britney Pitts. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and right now I'm a full-time PhD student at Virginia Commonwealth University in the School of Social Work. My favorite color is also orange. I'm researching aesthetic liberation for Black women, specifically when it comes to their hair and biracial experience.
Awesome.
I will next. My name is Caroline Ware. I am a third grade teacher in the city of Chicago. My favorite color is yellow. I use they, them pronouns, and I think that's everything.
Awesome.
And I'm Kaleb Germinaro. I'm a PhD student at UW, University of Washington. And he, him pronouns, originally from Phoenix, Arizona. And I research how to design learning environments that foster belonging and healing.
Awesome. Great. So real quickly, I wanted to kind of give this preamble before our panel discussion. We're going to go through some general questions, then I have some specific questions for members of our panel. And then we're going to open it up for Q&A at any point. If you have questions, words of affirmation, comments, please comment in the live chat. Those questions will then be tossed up to the panel, and we will try to answer as many questions as we can within the time we have together. We're going to try to go until about 6:30, so about a total of 90 minutes. And then, yeah, so let's get into this. All right, so when we sent this call out or the advertisement for this panel discussion, there were a lot of questions about some of the terminology. So I want to go over some of the terminology, and I think periodically we may have to kind of reestablish those for viewers who may be bouncing in and out. So Black-Biracial. So this term was coined by myself and Caroline Ware, who is a former student of mine. And they and I actually had the opportunity to have a lot of conversations around our identity formation. And after reviewing the literature, we felt that the Black-white biracial didn't accurately represent our experiences as individuals, but also too didn't take into consideration kind of the ecological or the contextual aspects of racial identity, especially for biracial people. So it is just simply a term of reference for right now. Admittedly, it has its own limitations because there are tons of bi and multiracial folks across this planet. And one thing that we, came up very quickly within our conversations, that region, nationality, parental makeup has a lot of effect on that term. So for all intents and purposes, Black-Biracial just simply means a first generation person who has one parent that is socially and self-designated Black, and one parent who is socially identified and self-designated as white. Racial ambiguity is a pretty nebulous term that roughly reflects a wide spectrum of melanin folks who at first appearance or through their presentation doesn't fit neatly within already socially prescribed monoracial categories. So when we say monoracial, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone is of one racial lineage. Additionally, when we talk about lineage and makeup, we don't want to conflate race with biology, but inevitably through the terminology we will. But it's important to establish that race is not biological. It is a social construct, which makes even it more difficult to have this conversation with biracial folks, because we are biracial because one of our parents is this and another parent is that. So I'm thinking, is there any other terminology? And we'll probably have some more terminology that I'll have to unpack as we move forward. So I want to talk about establishing what this is. This panel is comprised of scholars, human beings that are very much giving of themselves in ways that other people may not be familiar with. Additionally, you are getting entree into a subset of Black identity, an aspect of the African diaspora, but we are not performing for you or anyone else. This is our lives. This digital space is not a fish tank, and we are not specimens for study. Our stories are our truth. They are valid. They are legitimate. They are science, and we are worthy enough to be telling and sharing our stories. Additionally, we are not going to accept, and we will call out monoracial microaggressions. So for all the folks on here that want to like, oh, well, you have it better because of this and that. But we're not going to do that. So just in full disclosure, we are going to guard ourselves and establish those boundaries. Additionally, we are talking about something very intimate to our lives. And although this may, this is an informative, casual space, and it may be perceived as something of ease for us to talk about, but it's important for our audience to understand that our truth telling comes at a very high cost. This comes at the expense of a labor, an energy, and a vulnerability that is not just, easily discarded as, oh, well, you all are just talking about yourselves. And I want to establish that. Additionally, part of the reason and why we wanted to do this panel was to talk about specifically the commodification of racial ambiguity, and how folks are kind of profiting off of us and our existence. Now, with that being said, we're going to be launching some very specific critiques at individual people of notoriety. And with that being said, we separate the human being, their intent, and the outcome of the actions that they're engaging with. However, those things are connected. And it's important for us as we are having this casual conversation that folks understand that when we call out Kim Kardashian or other folks who profit off of masquerading as being part of the African diaspora, that we're not saying anything about that individual as a human being, right? It's just their actions are replicating a violence against us, a violence against our identity, as well as a cultural reproduction of colonization. And in this case, the colonization of our essence and our identity and really who we are as people. So, by the way, we are still looking and want justice for Breonna Taylor. I think it's important that we say that, because although that young lost man who murdered 2 people last night has been arrested, that's grateful. Y'all need to arrest those cops. Real talk. Okay. So I think I've given my spiel. And to begin this panel, we are going to ask something pretty intimate about the folks we have here today. So the dehumanization of Black's bodies is not new. Shit just popped off like the night before last. So this isn't a new phenomenon. It's not a new conversation. However, Black biracials are uniquely positioned where parts of our identities are being commodified by non-Black people. Specifically, there are Instagram models or people of fame. I forgot the other gender's name, but Ariana Grande, who are not Black or part of the African diaspora, but yet present themselves as racially ambiguous or part of the African diaspora, inevitably to profit and or prop up their fame or notoriety. So with that being said, I just want to ask the panelists, like, how does this make you feel? Like, on the real, like seeing white folks, white-skinned folks present themselves as racially ambiguous. How does that make you feel as a person?
I think when you stated the question, you said present themselves as racially ambiguous or as a part of that African diaspora. And I think that that is the part that I actually see more often. I think in the day, these days, people are not allowed to be racially ambiguous anymore. What they are is going to end up somewhere on their Wikipedia page, right? And everybody knows what you are, and you're going to be called out for X, Y, and Z. Unless, like we were talking a little earlier, you have some type of way to honor and respect these cultures that you're influenced by. But I don't always think that even in just saying, we were talking about Ariana Grande, and she says that I've been influenced by Whitney Houston. At one point, it was Mariah Carey. I don't think saying it is enough, because Whitney Houston still isn't getting any money from what you're doing. And, it's just not enough. And I wish that, so I read something a little while ago in my studies for class that said something about, it was a definition of ethnicity that included culture, food, music, etc. And the author was kind of positioning it as if you can participate in several ethnicities if you want to. You can learn to participate in several ethnicities if you want to. And it kind of just like, it took away ownership from the people who are born and raised into that, because everybody can do whatever it is that they want to do. Because this definition of ethnicity says that as long as I'm eating the food and I like it, or I'm listening to the music and I like it, then I can participate in this ethnicity. And I think that that has become something that everybody's doing. Like, I like it. I'm doing this because this is how I'm showing you respect, but we're not really asking people how they want to be shown respect.
Powerful. Others?
Yeah, I feel like, as far as like how it makes me feel, of course it used to like just piss me off, because of like what you said, like it's like your culture and you're seeing these other people just get to pick and choose whatever and make money from it. But more recently, the way I'm thinking about it is through like a colorist lens, you know, like who is this harming the most? And ultimately that's going to be, you know, dark-skinned Black trans women. And so I think like when we talk about these things, it's valid to talk about how it hurts us, but also I think maybe like that's not deep enough. Maybe, I don't know. I feel like I'm wanting to engage further in these conversations about like cultural appropriation or looking mixed, because at the end of the day, like that is a privilege we keep, you know. So I mean, I'm kind of still forming my like complete opinion and feelings on this, but I'm kind of leaning towards, I'm thinking of more important, or not important, because it is important, but bigger, more pressing things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I can add in, I had a conversation with one of a professor in my psychology program recently, and we were talking about how, you know, I'm thinking about people who can be racially ambiguous, and there's a profit to that. But me, just as a Black biracial, a person with a white mom and a Black dad, like I'm not even allowed to own my appearance all the time, because that in itself causes harm to Black women with darker skin, with kinkier hair. Like we have been, and it's not their fault, it's racism's fault, right? Racism is the reason why me celebrating the way that I look and just being happy with myself is harmful to other people. It's not their fault, it's not my fault, but it's this system that we've grown up in, that we've been socialized in, and how it is still causing harm. We were looking at, and we might get into this in another question, we were looking at these Instagram profiles that are like celebrating mixed heritage, and how they were starting to be called out as like fetishizing mixed race people. And I was thinking to myself, like, I followed a few of these pages, you know, because I did. And I was just thinking, oh, these are people who have a similar experience as me. I'm going to follow, I'm going to support, not even thinking about, you know, how is this coming across to other groups of women, other Black people. Am I now thinking about how, like, if white people say, well, if I wanted to celebrate whiteness, I would be racist. And I'm like, yes, you absolutely would. And now I'm like, well, shoot, if I'm mixed and I want to celebrate that I'm mixed, am I being racist? Am I being colorist? And it's like, damn, Britt, you might actually be doing that. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a deeper issue. It's an issue that we all came into, and we haven't done a good job figuring it out yet, how to heal that hurt.
Yeah, it's so messy, it's so complicated. And I feel like in this past week, just thinking about this panel, I've just been here and then over here, and I just think I finally have it figured out. And I'm like, okay, I really don't, because there isn't, you know, a one set way to look at this, because with colorism, it is about the shade of your skin, right? We all identify very similarly, obviously, racially, but the way that we're going to be walking throughout the world and the opportunities that will be presented to us or denied to us is largely influenced by how we look, right? The features, the proximity to whiteness. Yeah.
Thank you both. Kaleb, what are your thoughts?
I think, not to reiterate, but just like build off of what y'all were saying, like people who are benefiting from like our culture, right, in the way that we look, get to pick and choose when and how they are acting, and what spaces they get to like move through spaces and be who they want in those spaces, right? Like they have choice and agency in who they are, right? And we don't necessarily, right? Depending on how we wear our hair, depending on how long we've been in the sun, you know, over summer, right? Like our identity fluctuates based on how we look externally, no matter how we identify. And that's, I think, like the difference too, is like those people get to choose, and we don't. And people choose for us quite often, no matter how much we want to be seen a certain way. And I think that goes for a host of different identities too, right? Outside of just racial identities.
So taking in consideration, you know, it's almost kind of nexus of identities that we have to navigate that are contextually and even also kind of climatically or like inclined, right? So the further south you go, you may look differently to different people versus we spend a couple summers in Canada or whatever, right? So with that being said, if you had an opportunity to have a conversation, right? Because I think it's easy for us to kind of and I don't want to step past the fact that, you know, me as a male making a critique about what a female is engaging in her presentation is problematic. With that being said, the aspects of what they are doing causes me harm. And to the same extent, to the points that you were raising. So if you had an opportunity, regardless of who the person is, but it was someone who was augmenting their presentation, what would you share or say to them?
I think to start just like building off of what Brittany mentioned earlier, like, and Caroline both mentioned earlier, like just probing the question, do you know who you're actually harming? Like, and you know, and like probing that thinking, because I think there's like definitely an awareness gap as far as how people, because people just are trying to make money, I think, and don't like think about all the consequences, like because we live in capitalistic society and right. So I think that would be like definitely where I would start, more or less. I'm not necessarily sure if I would entertain or have the energy to have that conversation with people also, especially right now. So
Yeah.
That's real.
I echo that ditto. I would also want to ask, and this is the scholar in me, the future qualitative researcher in me, just ask, like, you know, who told you to do that? Like, who was on your team that said, let's do this, and tell me what those people look like. And I can tell you probably after you answer that where you messed up, and we can go from there. But I think part of, you know, and I don't want to say that people cannot like celebrate other cultures, but there's a way to do it that honors that culture, that honors that group. And if you're not asking them, then what you're doing is harmful, whether you think that it's respectful or not. If you don't ask and get the input from the people that you're emulating, then you're not doing any justice to them.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think it gets even like further complicated if you look at, like, for example, Kim Kardashian or any Kardashian, all of them are now mothers of Black children, right? Yeah. I think that that's a whole nother conversation to be had. but when they're, putting on these costumes or whatever, that's because what it feels like. There's the costume. I would just like to ask, like, why? Like kind of like what you said, Brittany, like the researcher, like, well, why do you want to wear this? Like, I think back to like discourse I've seen over whether white people can say the N-word, and the first thing people say is, why do you want to say it so bad? And usually they can work out the faulty logic themselves, honestly. But yeah, I'm also kind of with you, Kaleb. Like, I don't know. I don't have the time for that right now. I'll just let them look ugly by themselves.
And I think it's so deeply like steeped in what's just normal in society now. Like, do you even know what you're doing? Do you know why you're doing that? Other than it's profitable? Do you know why it's profitable? And just there's always been an exploitation, not even just of Black bodies, but of Black money, the Black dollar, because we spend on what we want, honey. And there's like, I would just want to know, do you know?
Yeah. Well, and Black knowledge too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in historical knowledge systems that are now being used, appropriated, and taken and invalidated regularly, right? We could go through, all the different, we could just go through external like things that we see between like hair, jewelry, clothes, all those types of things, right? And that's like a whole nother panel in and of itself.
Right. Yeah. I would say you all are definitely inspiring in the sense of like diplomacy. Cause like my reaction is like super cutthroat. Like for me personally, I think it's just like a shitty like white thing to do. Like it's this arrogance of like white folks have colonized the planet, you colonize bodies. We have a whole nother conversation about colonizing oppression. But like you're literally colonizing the essence of who we are, but literally making billions of dollars off of it. And for me, I can't, right? Although the typography and the mode is different, I really genuinely, like in my heart of heart, do not see the difference between that and like chattel slavery. Like granted, right? There's clearly the level of violence is different, but inevitably you're still enacting a violence of stealing something from Black people and profiting. Mm-hmm. And that's the part like I just can't let go. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I probably wouldn't have the best choice of words. And once again, I would have to navigate my own positionality with interacting with these people too, because being a larger male and having that level of frustration wouldn't come off right. So this kind of goes into the next question, and you all have kind of noted this in some of your responses. There is like this pathology of sexualizing racially ambiguous people, as well as, especially bi and multiracial people, right? And having previous conversations with all of you, I'm sure that you can remember sayings, idioms, colloquial kind of like things about like, oh, I want to have a mixed baby so they have good hair, or ooh, you got the good skin, or ooh, you the right color, right? And there's this extreme objectification to who we are, our bodies, and our presentation. So this is a big question. How do you suggest we address this history of violence against our bodies and this narrative about the objectification about who we are? I just asked the dissertation question.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is like, guys that I've dated, and I'm not even gonna lie, I didn't always see it this way. You know, as I've grown into an adult, I can see things differently, and I can, in hindsight, determine why people were actually interested in me when they were. But yeah, the blunt response is just to ask people, like, why do you not like yourself? Like, why do you not like the way that you look? You know, your mom doesn't look like me. I'm sure you think she's beautiful. Would you tell her the same thing that you're telling me? Yeah, that's where I will start. I don't know where I will go after that.
Okay. That's a good starting point.
I have a lot of thoughts about this, so I'm gonna try to stay focused. I mean, as far as like how do we begin addressing this, I think honestly you got to look at the white parent. I mean, making sure. I mean, they have a lot of work to do before even having a mixed child, right? Like confronting their own internalized anti-Blackness or whatever. I mean, no one wants to think of our mom or our dad as, you know, being complicit in this system that also oppresses the other side of our family. But like, it's like an uncomfortable truth that we have to, you know, live with. So like going back to Kim K, like, is she doing the work to like recognize her own complicity in racism in order to make sure that she's not enacting more trauma on her children, her daughters and sons? So I think like a lot of the work that needs to be done is within the people actually having mixed kids. But also like I'm thinking from like a teacher standpoint, right? That's something that I think needs to be kind of held censor in a classroom. This obsession with proximity to whiteness, that's something that we can kind of address and make sure we're doing our best to dismantle. And that's kind of just where I'm thinking about it. That's kind of my lens.
I'm gonna circle back because you opened like 3 or 4 Pandora boxes right there. Kaleb, do you have you know, what do you think are like the first steps, right? Or how do we address this?
Yeah, I think one, it has to start like with ourselves, right? And kind of just trying to see who we interact with. I think in specifically speaking, like my mom might be watching, and I've definitely held her, and she's white, and I've definitely held her very much accountable. I've been like, why do you only date Black guys? Like, why? Like, I didn't choose to be brought into this world. Like, you had an opportunity 25 years ago to like not bring a brown child or Black child into this world, and you have 2. And like, how are you? And you didn't bring them into a family that was not racist. So, what does that look like, right? So, and if people are like engaging in interracial relationships, you have to make it so it's like at least comfortable for the person who is of the oppressed identity to want to be around your family. Personally speaking, I don't, and like I won't go and hang out with my mom's side of the family anymore. It's just not like, that's just too much energy. My mom didn't realize that I was like experiencing like severe racism until it happened in front of her. This was like 2 years ago. So it was like, and I grew up in Arizona, which is like really white, really conservative place. And I was just like a prop in a lot of spaces, more or less, you know? And I'm sure y'all might have experienced that too. It's just like people touching your hair like you're a zoo animal, without like out in public too, just like random people touching on you, even as a little kid, you know, invalidating your Blackness while also like making you a commodity at the same time. And that's in family too. So it's like, that's where it starts personally, for me at least, like addressing that side of things.
Whew. Hey. Well, let's park it here for a minute, because I think you all have alluded to some things that probably people outside of our existence or our shared spaces aren't readily aware of. And what I hear too is like the role of the parent, right? So let's start with kind of the basics here. As you have evolved as adults, right? You've had time to kind of retrospectively look on your experiences, the things that play and inform you as an individual, but also to how you identify. How have you had those conversations with those close to you when it comes to talk about the uncomfortableness of one side of your family? Or, my mom and I have had multiple conversations about some very anti-Black sentiments that she carries. And she's been married to a Black man for now 40 years. So, she is not exempt. And I think too, there's also this kind of past when we think about even people of fame that like, oh, well, they have Black children now, so now they know. And it's like, I'm like, oh, hell no, you don't know shit. That don't mean anything. So how do you all walk in that space, right? What does that space look like for you, and how do you navigate that?
I think that I think I have a pretty rare experience that I actually grew up around a lot of Black, white, biracial children.
Oh, wow.
I grew up in a military town and a college town, so there's actually a lot more diversity there than some other places. And I think just, looking back, thinking about conversations that I've had, not even just with my parents, but parents of other people, or watching and observing their interactions, I think that some parents believe that their experience as an interracial couple, they think that they have some type of insight to what it is to be biracial. And it doesn't work. It's not the same. It's totally not the same thing to make a choice to date a Black person as a white person than to live as a biracial person, be born as a biracial person, and have to navigate the world that way. Yeah, not the same. I think that my mom did not. I was in high school. I took a sociology class, and I came home and tried to explain white privilege to my mom, and she was not having it. This executive commander in the Navy was like, "Nah, I'm a woman. I worked for this. My race did not help me." And it wasn't until I got a lot older that I could explain that it's not necessarily that it helped you, but it didn't hinder you the way that it hinders other people. And my brother, who is 4 years younger than me, I don't think she really got that it really is different until he was old enough to start driving, and until they had to start talking to him about, how to interact with police, how to carry yourself when you're out in public, what to say to certain people. I think then she started to have a better understanding of it. But honestly, it's still a work in progress. And I can say that my mom is a lot further than the rest of her family. And I haven't even, I haven't cut people off, but these are conversations that I'm not ready to have, because I don't want to get to a point right now that I'm cutting people off. But I feel like it could go that way.
Yeah, those are both powerful points that you raise about the false equivalence of, because I don't know, have the three of you or the other folks on the panel, have you heard that too? Like, well, because my parents are older, so they were like, how hard it was to be an interracial couple in the 70s? And I'm like, it's not the same thing, but okay.
I haven't really had that kind of situation. More so my parents have told me stories of for example, how my mom, who's white, how she had conversations, how she navigated those personal conversations when she started, dating my dad, more so the individual rather than their experience as a couple. But that's interesting. I didn't make that connection.
Yeah, I think similarly, because I am like a darker skinned Black biracial person, also, like I look way different than my mom. Like none of our features are very similar. So like she got questioned quite a bit when she was, well, I was younger and she was also younger, because she was a young mom too. So there was like a lot of that, I think. And because I'm also a boy and my mom is a girl, right? There's like a different dynamic there too. So I think I'm I'm really hard on my mom because she's the one who I think can change her family's mind, and I have tried, and it's just not going anywhere. And my mom's like been very much receptive to these things also. And shout out to her if she is watching because I love her. But I think as someone who carries that privilege in the family, right, of being white, because white people like to listen to white people talking about race things. Like you have to have these conversations. It's not like I'm not going to be the one to change somebody who's like 75 and really conservative and thinks that because they have one Black friend that they're like good and they like me, so they're good. You know, I'm not going to change their mind.
All right. I want to get to our next question here, and then we're going to pivot into some specific questions. This is, like I said, I'm taking notes too at the same time, and I'm thinking like, dang, that could be a topic. That could be a topic. That definitely needs to be a topic. So with that being said, it's important we think about context. I know Caroline and myself had a real strong critique of identity formation models, and not to get like super deep in the weeds about scholarship or whatever, but historically, a lot of identity models for bi and multiracial people like ended in some like euphoric, like, yay, they'll be accepted by everyone. And then the more widely used or current ecological approach gave some nod to forging a new space. And our publication kind of critiqued that heavily, saying that our racial identity isn't owned by us. And a lot of times monoracial people, highlighted in some of you all comments, basically either puppeteer or chess move our existence to fit whatever narrative fits that context. To make it plain to folks, also how a lot of times people recognize us, right? So I live in the Midwest. By first appearance, people think, oh, you're brown, you're Mexican, right? Because only brown people in the Midwest are Mexican, which is hella racist too. But anyway, but then when I'm like on the East Coast, right, they think I'm Dominican. Then when I was in the Dominican Republic, they thought I was Puerto Rican, right? So, you know, it was never a thing that I owned, right? It was something about someone else's interpretation of who I was. Then also too felt like they could tell me where I was placed. So with that being said, right, as mentioned earlier, there is plenty of examples of anti-Black practices and practices of violence against Black bodies going on. How are you all? First of all, let's ask the legit question first. How are y'all doing?
That's a loaded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not good.
Mm-hmm.
Not good.
Yep. Same. Horrible.
Yeah, I think it's really hard also to be in different places where things are happening too. So like, again, like back to context, right? Like being in Seattle, there's been like a lot going on here as far as protests and different policy changes and stuff and organizing stuff. And we're really privileged here in that you can organize, like, I mean, the police are not great, obviously. But like just seeing where other people are at and what other Black people are having to go through right now in other places, it's like that kind of helpless feeling sometimes. I think, and it's also like tiring seeing Black people killed on social media and white people sharing it very regularly as if it's, you know, a ticket to watching somebody get lynched, right? Because that's ultimately what it is. So like now at this point, it's like every single movie with Black people ends with, you know, some type of trauma or some type of tragedy. We don't have, that's a whole nother conversation too. But it's really tiring, right? Like I've just been exhausted, extremely exhausted.
So I've gotten to a point where I was watching some show on HBO with my boyfriend, Lovecraft County, I think is what it's called.
How is it?
And well, when I realized what we were watching in the first few minutes, that this was something that had some type of like racial tension element to it, I had no idea what it was before I turned it on. But when I realized that, I was like, you know what, babe, like I just can't. Like I cannot consume any more of this right now. Even though I know this is fiction, it's science fiction, like there are monsters in it. But just the fact that that's an underlying part of the story, like I just cannot right now.
That's real talk.
Right. I also watched that, Britney, and I think it's interesting because like that is Black horror, right? Like it's not the monsters. It's nothing to do with the physical monsters, and I feel that is draining, and kind of like speaking to what you were saying, Kaleb. I'm in Chicago, and I'm as like a teacher, obviously, and it's just, if you haven't been keeping up with the news, it's kind of the battle of the coast and everybody else, and just seeing the protests. And right now, the school board is like voting whether to keep cops in the school, and like actual kids are out there putting their bodies, like protesting. And like, I just also just trying to balance like what remote learning looks like, and making sure that like these Black and brown kids are able to receive an education that is comparable to kids on the north side. It's just like so much going on right now in my brain and in the city. So yeah, I'm really feeling that.
I thank you all for sharing. I think the fatigue is apparent. Whether it's the fatigue or the tiredness of seeing the cycle of imagery, the cycle of oppression porn that is littered through and across social media. A colleague of mine and I were just talking yesterday about this because they were excited and on fire and want to go out and demonstrate or do something in response to Brother Jacob. And in all honesty, I just went home and hugged my kids. Like, I mean, I genuinely don't have the capacity. I just don't. I'm like, I'm fighting so many other fights. I'm just like tired. Like I'm tired of the shit, tired of seeing it. And I still don't know how to process that part too. Like, am I just that numb to it? So I thank you all for being brave and for sharing. And I'm going to ask this, and feel free to opt out, right? Do you have points where you think about the negotiation that has to happen or does happen as it relates to your identity as a biracial person and the racial unrest that's happening now?
For me, the place where this happens most often is my white family. Because if I'll be honest, when I'm around my Black friends and my Black family, it's like I'm just, for this issue, I'm very specific, for this particular issue, I'm just one of them. But I feel like, and that's not the case for everything, especially when it comes to my hair. But this is where I kind of have to like distance myself from family, because they just are not getting it. They will never get it. And there might be potential that they could one day, but I also don't want to have to teach every white person in my family about why their views are so problematic, and that blue is not a life and it's a job. And like that, aside from actually seeing things pop up on social media and going to protests, which I've been doing all summer, that inner dialogue that I have with myself every time I see a family member post something, that is the part that is exhausting for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because one, I do feel like I'm not in a good place to have that conversation with them. And two, I don't even want to entertain what I might feel like if what I have to say is dismissed. I don't think my family would do that. I don't think they would, but I know that the potential is there, or that, you know, a lot of people think that being nice is the same as being empathetic, and it's not. And what I don't want is to get a pat on the head and thanks, Britney, for bringing this up. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, but my views and my opinions really haven't changed any. And I just myself, I'm not ready to accept that that could potentially be the outcome of having this kind of conversation with my family. And Kaleb, I think that's dope that you've stood firm in your, you know, stand your ground, and I just won't partake with this side of my family if that's what it is. I haven't gotten there yet, to be totally transparent and honest.
Yeah. I think building off that too, what's helped me at least this summer and like filled my cup per se, is like connecting more with my Black family. Like my aunt and grandma are on the call right now. I'm watching, and I get to see my aunt really soon, and I haven't seen her for a very long time. So I'm really excited for that. And also like connecting with like my biological dad's side of the family, which is all from like rural Georgia, and like just learning about my family members and like strengthening my own Black identity. Because anywhere I go, I'm Black, right? So like there's no question whether my hair is long, short, and like, you know, I've been out in the sun a bunch, so I'm a little bit darker than I am usually in the winter in Seattle. So it's like I'm Black where I go, and carry that identity. And I also check like the white side of me, like that I'm like of the oppressed and oppressor, right? And so it's like always towing that line, but also always holding both in tension, and also like joy and pain at the same time, holding both, because they can exist in the same world, at least in my opinion. And so been trying to focus on like the joy part of it, right? And like just connecting with my family as much as I can during this time. Because I don't have family in Seattle, so I'm just like chilling out here. Or I have one cousin who's out here, but just chilling, you know, otherwise.
I think that's interesting, Kaleb, that you mentioned like no matter where I go, I'm Black, because I think that is kind of like the opposite of my personal philosophy, I guess you could say, because I am so light and have so many features that code as white. I feel like it is my responsibility to utilize that, right? That is my privilege. That is something that I can use. And so when it comes to like navigating this space, like if I had, you know, conversations with my mom this summer, like it wasn't even a conversation. It was like, this is what I expect, you know, as far as your agency as a white woman, like you can't like just say, oh, I don't want to go there. You don't have that luxury anymore. Those are like conversations that I'm having because I feel like it's my responsibility, right? I'm in a place where I can do that with little to no harm, I guess.
And I thank you all for sharing your examples. And it's my hopes that there are other folks who similarly identify like we do and are wrestling with these same tensions, right? And I like that example, holding both in tension of existence. Similar to Brittany saying that, when you're in black spaces, you're just part of the family. But in white spaces, it's not. So I just want to ask, how many of you have white family members who would identify as, in your eyes, kind of like the ops, like they're on the other side?
All of them. And I want to be like, my family loves me. I want to put that out there, and I love them also. They're very conservative. They are steeped in the same socialization that we all have been, and they chose their side. And I think it is very much the wrong side. Whole lot of racistness that they don't understand as racistness is, I think that it's really easy to point out people who are intentionally racist or intentionally using their power to, disparage other people. I know my family doesn't do that on purpose, but they do it. Your stance that you're taking does that. You posting a Blue Lives Matter flag does that. You posting All Lives Matter does that. And in their ignorance, they think, well, I'm just supporting police because they have a hard job. I think everybody life matters, which there's a nuance to that is not just all lives matter doesn't mean all lives matter. All lives matter means Black people shut up. That's what that means. But if you're not trying to see the nuance in it, you won't. And I think that there's a blissful ignorance that allows you to stand in that. Yeah, and you're gonna have to be confronted by somebody, and it's probably gonna be me one day. Just not yet. Not today. I'm tired. Sis is tired.
I hear you. So before we pivot into some specific questions, maybe something that could be or could not be a little bit more lighter. We've all mentioned something to some extent about our hair. Now, like all of us clearly have different presentations of our hair and arguably probably different textures and feel to our hair. So I just want to say first publicly, y'all hair is on point. Y'all hair is fire, it's flame, it snaps, it's all that, okay? For me personally, my hair has been always a point of contest and conflict. So as a kid in my all Black neighborhood, I was coined Michael Jackson, and that was my nickname. And that is a very complex othering that, once again, could be its own standalone conversation. And my mom, for the longest, made me keep my ponytail because my hair was really long when I was younger, and then I just had a ponytail. Definitely a 90s kid. And inevitably, I cut it off. And for the majority of my adult life, from I would say 15 to like last year, my hair was always short. It helped me navigate spaces because when my hair is long like this, people are like, dog, what's going on? Right? Like, who are you? Like, you part Shaggy Dog? Like what's going on? So part of my hair growth is for me, and it's to remind me of not being afraid of the othering that comes with whatever the creator gave me. And I am trying to force myself to love the way my hair wants to do whatever it wants to do. Like, it's like mad frizzy right now. Other times when I get up the shower, I look like Rico Suave's little brother. Like, it does its own thing. And I'm becoming more comfortable with it. So I want to ask you all, how are you coming into a newness or a comfortable or a love with your own hair?
We're gonna need another 3 hours. Well, my hair, obviously, very kinky, coily. It hasn't always been that way as far as like the way I wear it, because it was the most obviously Black thing about me, and the way I grew up and the way I was like moving throughout the world was to like cling to whiteness, right? So like this had to go because this is a big sign that says she's got something in there. But as you know, I kind of went through my journey with my identity. My curls have kind of been like my love letter to myself almost, and kind of like, again, like what you said, Kaleb, like holding both intentionally, like it is like an indisputable thing about me, you know, and it's like a constant reminder, you know, it I don't know how exactly I want to word that, but yeah, I think you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I hear you. You still snapping?
Yeah, I think similarly, my hair has like always been like a point of discussion with people because I grew up also in a white area. So like curly hair is like the new wave the whole time that I was like a child. You know, it's like, and that wave lasted and is still going, you know. And I had ringlets for a while. I had short hair for a very long time until I was like about 10. Then I started growing out my hair because my dad's like, you don't know how to take care of your hair. We're going to keep it short. And so again, like, you know, that your identity, your like the way that people perceive you changes with hair too. And then I got dreads in college, had dreads for a while. Then I cut off my dreads, just had long curls. And so it's like been a journey. It's also been like a very subtle way for me to express myself. And my mom used to do my hair. My white mom would watch YouTube videos and stuff. So it was another way for us to connect on things, which was cool. And so, I mean, I appreciate my hair. I'm about to grow it back out, which is fun. So yeah.
That's what's up.
Yeah, similarly, Kaleb, my mom was a beast with the cornrows, with the plaits and ponytails. Like she really did her thing. My mom was also in the military though. So there were times when, you know, she would have to leave on these 6-month tours and the care of my hair would be left to a friend's mom. And during one of those times, that friend's mom took me to get a relaxer and my mom was pissed, beyond furious. And I was like 11. I didn't know what that meant. I had a cheerleading competition coming up. They took me to the hair salon, and that's what we did for my cheerleading competition hairstyle. I had no idea what that was. And then so after it was done, you know, if you know anything about relaxing your hair, you kind of have to, unless you want to go through this stage of like it breaking off and shedding and all of that, you kind of just have to keep up with it. So I wore my hair straight for like 8 years. And I went natural again, I don't know why people say that, like your hair is what it is when it's natural, you don't go natural. But anyway, so I went back natural as a late teenager. And it really didn't have anything to do with how I perceived my hair or my identity. It was just like my hairdresser kept saying, you don't need relaxers. Like you can wear your hair straight if you want to, it's going to go straight. And so I didn't. And then I started learning that I actually like how my hair looks curly. I wonder why this person did that while I was 11 years old. And so that's how I wear it now. I used to love doing my hair. Now I hate doing my hair. It takes too much time. I'm thinking about getting locks just for the convenience of it. Again, not for anything that has to do with my identity, just my time and the convenience of it. But yeah, it definitely played a huge role in how I was perceived throughout middle and high school. You know, a black girl walks into a room and she doesn't smile or say hey to anybody, they think she's aggressive and mean. Light-skinned black girl walks into a room, the white people think she's aggressive and mean. The black girls think she's snobby and stuck up. So yeah, that was my lived experience all throughout middle and high school, all to do with my hair.
Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing about your hair. And Brittany, I want to follow up with a specific question. You have mentioned you are a doctoral student right now. And as a doctoral student, how do you navigate the academy and using academy broadly speaking as a Black biracial woman? And how has your presentation, social perception of your presentation and identity affected your relationship and the scholarship within the academy?
I tend to feel like the wider the space I am, the blacker I feel. And it's again, it has nothing to do with me. Like you said earlier, we don't get to really pick our identity, it's chosen for us. But I always feel like when I'm in a white space, there's no need to tell people that I'm mixed, because it's just already obvious that you're not white. Like, it doesn't really matter what else you are. You're white or you're other. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience. I have my program, I go to a PWI. We have 2 tenure track Black faculty who are not tenure yet, and they're the only ones, or they were the only ones when I got there. We've hired 1 more since then, and I think that just in itself is telling of my program. But I see this comment, so I'll address it, that I came into my identity as a Black biracial versus just a mixed girl when I went to college. And it was what was happening in society when I was an undergrad. That was when the incident with Trayvon Martin happened. And again, I realized at that time that I was in a very white space, and that is what kind of pushed me into the Black side of my identity. And the social situations have not changed since then. And the spaces that I occupy are still predominantly white spaces. So that identity has stuck, and it probably will be the one that sticks going forward.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, we need to have a longer conversation about your program and the lack of Black folks within that space. That's definitely going to be an off-channel conversation because that's legit truth. And I am advocating in every higher education space. And it's not like we don't exist. And let's be clear, and I just want to establish this for all university folks out there. The work of Black professors is always going to be 2, 3 times a job. We do a lot of things for undergraduate, graduate students that goes unseen and is not compensated labor. Then also too, we all still have to do with the racist shit. I remember like my first month at Knox, they called the police on me because I dressed up like a clown. And let's be clear, I'm new here at SIUE and I have been followed 3 times by SIUE police. So let's be clear, like just because I have some letters behind my name, it doesn't mean anything. And for the people asking, I did drive different cars at the time. So that's my little soapbox and my issue with campus and Edwardsville police. So next specific question. Kaleb, as a former collegiate athlete, how did your identity as an athlete, right, separating your racial identity, your maleness, how did that impact, inform, complicate your identity as a Black biracial man?
Yeah, I think at certain points, I often identified as like just an athlete and just like tried to keep it at that. I think because where I went to school also, if you got in there like for sports, it was often like, oh, you just got here for sports. Like you're actually not as smart as you everybody else is, or like just another way to invalidate. And then like being a Black athlete who plays football, also it's like, yo, you ain't shit. Why are you here? And I'm getting PhD, so screw all those people. But you know, it's like I think and I was talking about this with one of my roommates who's also Black biracial and played college football. Like growing up, people would be like, "Oh, you're only good at sports because you're half Black," and so, or like ask those questions of like, "Oh, do you have like extra muscles in your legs, like, or did you get that Black side, you know, and stuff like that." And so, and I think like at that age, I was definitely like internalizing racism quite a bit too, and so when I did like have my dreads, it was like a way for me more or less to try and validate my Blackness more, just so I could like have a stronger connection to that side of me. And then now I do miss my dreads, but it's also like I think athletics and like my Black biracial identity like go hand in hand, because now I coach high school football and try and like channel a lot of that with my players, and also still seen as Black, right? And don't get to choose. And I mean, like, and I think again, like another example of like how sports, like being in the privilege of playing sports, like I think like the privilege of that, standing up for Black folks, right? And there's a lot of privilege of being a Black biracial male who also plays sports. I think similar to like Colin Kaepernick or the NBA right now. You know, they're boycotting the games today, and there's a host of number of like Black players, white players, international players, and Black biracial players, right? There's like a unique platform where those identities are both together and meet at their intersection, where you can take a stand, I think, because in our society, like people idolize sports more than other things. And being in a sport that is like all males too, there's a lot of privilege in that.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Like I said, as you all are talking, I'm taking notes, but also thinking about like, dang, we can do a podcast or something just on some of these things you all are saying, because it's so meaningful, and there's so many nuance that, you know, in our short time together, we're not going to be able to get to. But again, I appreciate you all sharing. So this is going to be our last question for the panel, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So Caroline, right, you're a classroom teacher in the Chicago area. How has your presentation, the social perception of who you are, impacted, informed, assisted, complicated your relationship with students, their family, and community shareholders?
So I can't help but like the way I was thinking about this completely changed when you told your story, Dr. Nate, because I think that my experience in undergrad, like, you know, becoming an educator is what impacted my racial identity. And that was because of meeting Dr. Nate. I mean, he was the first biracial teacher I ever had, you know, and that was just such a like crazy thing for me, like a crazy feeling. And so that kind of like spurred this, I don't know, journey, I guess you could say. So I guess what I'm trying to say is having someone there to help me like navigate that has kind of put me in a place where I feel really like just calm, pretty stable, kind of just go with the flow with my identity. Because that's kind of what we've done our whole lives, right? Like code switch, like professional code switchers. So as I became more comfortable with that, I think that's helped me just kind of lean into my ability to code switch. Because I do teach, I've taught at 3 very different schools, you know, the all white, the all Black, and a little bit of everything. Well, mostly Black and Latino. And so I feel most comfortable in the mixed school. Wonder why. But I think that does have to do with, you know, kind of this feeling of like, are they gonna like look at me and think, what is this white girl doing here? You know, or if I'm in the white school, like, who is this? Like, what are they trying to do here? So I think there is like a level of comfort I feel and like confidence when I'm in a space that I'm not as hyper aware of how I might be perceived. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think that's translated into how you interact with your students? Because I mean, we're physical human beings, right? And being in spaces that affirm who we are has an impact on how we engage with others. Have you seen that translated in how you interact with your students and or their parents?
Yeah, so I guess like the discomfort I was talking about earlier was more so with adults, right? Whether it's my colleagues or parents, whoever. When it comes to the kids, I mean, there's not so much of that discomfort, but that is something like a point I make like early on in the year. Like we have regular discussions about identity and like what that looks like. So I think we kind of have a space where that's normal within the classroom. It's outside of it is when it gets a little murky.
I got you. All right, cool. So we want to pivot in our last 15 minutes or so together to open the floor to questions. And Dr. Krim is going to pitch up some questions. I'm going to read them, and whomever wants to jump on those, feel free. All right, so first question. Mom of two Black biracial kids, a Black woman, how do you suggest navigating the fine line between helping them celebrate who they are without inadvertently feeding into the fetishization pathology? Ooh.
Can we define like pathology and stuff too? Just some of those words are not super transparent.
Great. So to fetishize someone is to hypersexualize and objectify the person as an object of usually physical or sexual desire. And the pathology is a way or disease of way of thinking. So this we inherit this societal belief that biracial people are hyper beautiful, right? I think the Halle Berry effect, right? Like ideal beauty, right? What I hear in this question is, right, I want my children, and once again, I don't know this person, I'm just paraphrasing from the question, but what I hear is the idea of like, how do I celebrate, honor, and like, you are beautiful, you are these things, but tote that line where I'm not like, oh, well, you fine because you mix, right? That's what I hear. So what are y'all suggestions, right? Because I think we made comments earlier about our parents and their perceptions around us. What advice would you give to said parents?
I think that there's a subtle but still big difference between saying to your child you're beautiful and saying something like you're beautiful because XYZ. And I think that, if you're just really intentional about what it is about your child that you're uplifting, and also if we're saying that we're celebrating who they are, we need to learn who they are, right? And who they are is not just how they look. And it's not just what they were born into either. It's their own interest and things that they're going to develop as time goes on, but really leaning into that and just not putting any caveats on why they are beautiful. You're beautiful because you are. You're smart because you are, and not adding anything extra to that has anything to do with how they present or look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of going off of that, Brittany, just like really checking your own like internalized habits towards like anti-Black thinking. Lots of my Black relatives, I grew up, praising my skin, my eye color. Like it was framed in a way. It's like, oh, you're lucky. Like, wow, you hit the lottery. And I think just making sure you're careful with the language that you're using when you are celebrating, because of course, like girls should be celebrated, but if you're using like just like ascribing a value like good or bad, just being very conscious of the language you're using, I think is probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, y'all hit the nail on the head there. I think just the only thing to add is like just don't project like your own things onto your kid. I guess like your own values and your own like idealness of the child, I guess, because then they are able to like very much celebrate themselves, and you celebrating themselves with however they are, right? And taking them as they are, and uplifting those parts of them that they see, and whatnot.
Awesome. Phenomenal. Next question. At what age did you begin to identify with your Black side and felt comfortable with that identity? I'll take this first because I'm the oldest of the group. I think there's a distinct difference between the three of you all and me. Because I grew up, I was born in 1985. And it wasn't until like I was out of high school that I seen options for bi or multiracial people, right? I adamantly remember like filling out these cards that you had to fill out at the beginning. And it was the it wasn't Reagan, I think it was Nixon, right? The 5 categories, right? And there was no bi or multiracial, you were just Black. So for me, conceptually, I never knew where there was a start point because I was always Black, because I never existed in a space as white. Now I was othered in Black spaces, I was othered in white spaces, but I never knew what it meant to be other than that. So for you all, what age did you begin to identify with your Black side and felt comfortable with that identity?
I'll reiterate what I said earlier. I grew up in a place where it wasn't uncommon to see biracial children, and so I was happily biracial until I got to college. And again, the wider the space that I'm in, the more I lean into my Black side. Not even because I just felt like I should, but because I was kind of pushed there. Not that I regret that at all, but the college and the incident with Trayvon Martin was that for me. So I was 19, I think.
Yeah, those are 2 different ages for me versus like when I identified with my Blackness, like always, that was a thing. But when I became comfortable, probably like till college and, having these conversations with Dr. Nate, I would literally just go to his office for no other reason than to just be like, I'm confused, dude. And just having conversations about that, because those weren't conversations that I had growing up.
I think similarly, I think like when I was like willing, like I became more willing to explore my Black identity, it was in college. Like when I chose to explore it rather than like having people force me to confront it, which has like kind of been a theme throughout the whole conversation. And I think like because I went to school in Philly, where like I was just another dude on the street, which was super nice. That's when I was able to like feel comfortable and feel unseen for a moment. And it was like very much dope. Like it was honestly just like super exhilarating in that like I could just be another person on the street. Then like going to places like New York and DC, I'm like, damn, there's hella Black people here. Not Arizona. And so I think like context and place really matter too, because like Philly, it allows you to be like to explore more just because there's more Blackness there, as far as like just landmarks, and maybe not landmarks, but just like people around physically.
I have a quick question, Kaleb. Sorry, just to like clarify. Do you think that it was because you saw like also maybe just a more like a diversification of what Black looks like? Okay. Yeah.
100%. I mean, like there was where I went to school. There was like I had my first Black teacher or professor, right? Who was a dark-skinned Black woman, and I was like, "Yo, you're dope," and it was, and I was like so exhilarated to be in that space. I mean, also there's people who like worked at the university who were Black, and also like just everybody in between, right? As far as like class, gender expression, and then there's a host of different people, like Blackness from the whole diaspora too. So it wasn't just descendants of slaves, right? Like a host of different people from different countries there. And so it was like so starkly different than Phoenix. Although like my family there is like very much like pushing Blackness, and it's just a different perspective, right? I'm very thankful to like leave home and get that experience too.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So we got about 6 minutes or so. So I was trying to get 2 questions in. And then just for the sake of time, I'll just, if we could just do like 1 or 2 of you respond. That way we can get 2 in. So yeah. Half white, Puerto Rican woman. Found a lot of your words resonated with my experiences. Married 2 Black men. What is one thing you wish your parents would have done, said to help your identity development?
I think that parents do the best that they can. What I wish my parents would have done is just to be comfortable in what they don't know, and to allow space for you don't know. So as I'm exploring and I'm talking to you, just listen to my experience, and don't necessarily try to fix it for me or tell me how I should feel about what it is that I'm going through.
Any other suggestions?
I think I said it earlier, just like confronting your own anti-Blackness tendencies and just making sure like you are not inflicting trauma unknowingly on your child, because that unfortunately happens if you don't do that work. Yeah.
All right. Great. I keep hearing constantly like good listening, watch driving, and a lot of self-awareness or self-reflexivity. Like, what are you trying to fulfill or pushing on or projecting? Because I think one of you said that as well. Okay.
It's a 2-part question.
Okay, 2-part question. How can biracial, light-skinned Black folks help dismantle internalized racism within our community, i.e. colorism, being that they are recipients in favor of these constructs? And I often hear the critique that light-skinned Black people can't speak on it because they benefit from it, and it's frustrating. Okay. So two-part. One, I think it's important for us to distinguish. There are monoracial Black folks that are just very fair-skinned. And then there are biracial people who have Black, white parent. Yeah. So can we start with the latter part of that question first? Because I think that's how often, or I often hear the critique that light-skinned people can't speak on this. So yeah, I'll let y'all take that one.
So I hear you on the feeling of frustration, but I think what that frustration is really showing is like an uncomfortableness, because it's like, how do I say this? My point of view is not so much that light-skinned Black people or biracial people can't speak on it. It's just that they take up too much space. Excuse me. When they are speaking up on it. So like a very easy example is like, what's her name? Zendaya, the actress Zendaya, who I'm pretty sure is biracial or light-skinned, getting a lot of roles, you know, or other light-skinned actors getting roles that could have gone to dark-skinned people. And so I think there's this frustration, valid frustration, of people who look like us taking up a whole lot of space. So as far as like how, or are we going to that first part? We want to stay on the second part.
How would you interrupt not just this perception, but the internalized conflict? Because that's what I hear in this question too, is like colorism, the spectrum of melanin, and the conflict within group.
how to disrupt it within yourself. I mean, for me, it's just like, it's just something you have to do. You just have to get over those feelings of like, it's not like a personal attack. You know, it does feel like a personal attack. It can, but it's not. When you have like actual Black bodies being just murdered, I mean, like there's other things, you know, other bigger issues, you know, not that this isn't an issue. I don't want to diminish that. I don't know how to say this. Someone help me out.
I think I'm sorry, Kaleb, I saw you again. Right. I think it's an acknowledgement that we've all been placed on this racial hierarchy that we ourselves didn't have any part in creating, but it's there. And just part of acknowledging that the people who feel the most hurt or who are hurt the most by the system is dark-skinned Black people. Acknowledging that means that sometimes we do need to, as Caroline was saying, just we got to pass the seat. And that doesn't mean that we don't have something to say or that we're not, you know, all on the same side. But sometimes we got to pass the seat. That's just like we have to tell our white allies sometimes, like, you can't be the forefront of racial injustice issues. Like, you just can't. You can't be the person in that role. And sometimes as lighter skinned Black people, we have to be able to pass the torch too. Because even though we are on this hierarchy also, and we're not the people at the top, we do feel hurt. We're still not at the bottom of that hierarchy. And those people are the ones who need the voice and need to be leading the charge.
Right. And kind of like this issue or this feeling that we're feeling, like that's also harming them, right? So if we can resolve and dismantle that, it's going to benefit us as well, right? So I mean, it's all connected. Yeah. And I think it's our responsibility to understand where we sit within these spaces and what that means within these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this was mentioned in like one of my book groups yesterday, like that, you know, America is a caste system, right? And Black people, no matter, it's like one drop rule. Black people and Native people are at the bottom of the caste, right? And even if you got lighter skin, you're still at the top of the caste. So there's still darker skinned people like at the bottom rung of the caste. So we have the privilege to lighten potentially the load of darker skinned people, right? Whether it be like doing the busy work of like racial injustice stuff because they're dealing with a lot, or if they have another marginalized identity or minoritized identity, we try and take the brunt if we're like cis or right, so like or straight, right? And so there's like these other things that come into play in the caste system too, or if we have more money, right? Like using the different privileges to also confront things and understanding that there is a hierarchy because of colonialism and patriarchy and all those other things too. And so we have personally like a duty to try and lighten the load for other people who have been carrying a lot of the weight of these fights, right, against injustice, while also like sometimes just taking a back seat as far as like verbally speaking and physically taking up space. So it's okay to be behind the scenes. Sometimes that's a cool role too. So
I think it goes back to, like we said, if you're really trying to honor and respect where people are coming from, ask them how we can be useful, instead of just assuming that our voice is the one that needs to be heard in that moment.
Yeah. And once again, I think this is a great segue and a point to establish that we need to have further conversations, because I would love to dive into this more, right? And I forgot what comedian said this, but like Obama was the right kind of Black to win, but we needed that right Black to win for someone else to get in that space, right? Now, there's some questioning in space about ownership of Blackness, because it's not, although you may be light skinned or because we're biracial, it doesn't mean that we don't have the the same rights to it. It's just our perceptions and the privileges that we're afforded because we're the acceptable Negro, right, in presentation. It affords us opportunities that our more sun-kissed brothers and sisters don't have. And that's a burden, but also an honor for us to make way in space. Like, because nothing I have said that there hasn't been some dark-skinned Black woman hasn't said 80, 60, 100, thousands of years before, right? But you won't hear me, but let me introduce you to them, right? So, and that, like I said, that to me is entree into a new space that we can further unpack more. But this is our closing time. I want to give a special thanks to our audience for participating. Again, I want to give honor to the land, the people's land that we stand on, and the digital spaces that we occupy on this colonized land. Additionally, giving honor and praise to our ancestors for aligning this opportunity to be possible. And a special thanks, Kaleb, Britney, Caroline, for your labor, your expertise. I hope that after you get off this panel, you engage in some form of self-care. This was a very vulnerable time for you all, and I don't want to miss that. And with that being said, are there any parting words that you want to give to our audience?
Abolish the police.
I second that.
Yeah. Arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor. Yeah. And fight for those, because all y'all who are watching who have privilege, your voice goes much farther than ours may even go. So.
Awesome. Once again, peace and love. Thank you all for joining us. If you haven't heard, we do have a podcast series that will be launched momentarily within the next week or so. I'm looking at Jesse. Okay. It is called Blacktivism in the Academy. And I can go ahead and name drop that our first, well, we have a podcast introducing the Dream Collective, but our first guest on the podcast series is the one and only Gloria Lansing-Billing. And Dr. Stevie, who had an intergenerational conversation about hip hop pedagogy. And we're going to talk about student activism, crit walking in the academy, undergraduate activism, faculty activism, so on and so forth, just really highlighting what does it mean to be in the academy or be a part of the academy, but still be in the streets. I once again want to thank you all for joining us. Peace and love to you all. See y'all later. Can you stop broadcasting or can I? Okay.